everybody. This is Mrs. Curley again, and today I am going to be going over just one vignette with you. It's one of my favorite ones, and this is going to be for Tuesday's lesson. What you should have done before this is you should have taken the House on Mango Street quiz and then done some independent reading of a book of your choice. And then now we are going to go through a new vignette called Edna's Ruthie. That's on page 67 to 69. And we're going to read it together. And then I'm going to go through some of the notes that you can see right here on your screen that I'll also be posting to Google Classroom. There is an assignment over this vignette that is called Edna's Ruthie Characterization, and it has some in-depth questions and some text evidence where you have to analyze both both Ruthie and her mother, Edna. And so that will be a graded assignment that will be due by Wednesday night. So let's go ahead and get started. Edna's Ruthie is on page 67. I think you'll see a lot of connections as we get into this vignette to other vignettes. And I tried to put some things in the notes about how there are connections to other places where you've seen other examples of motifs or character contrasts to this character named Ruthie. Now, Ruthie is a very unusual character. She's probably one of my favorite characters in this book. When we never see her again, just like all the other characters that come in where they're only in one vignette. But she is so different than the other characters in the book that I think it's a really important contrast. So we're just going to read, first of all. So this is on page 67. And follow along if you want to listen aloud, or you can pause this and read it on your own. And then we will discuss. Page 67. In the book, Edna's Ruthie. Ruthie, tall, skinny lady with red lipstick and a blue babushka, one blue sock and one green because she forgot, is the only grown-up we know who likes to play. She takes her dog Bobo for a walk and laughs all by herself, that Ruthie. She doesn't need anybody to laugh with. She just laughs. She is Edna's daughter, the lady who owns the big building next door, 3 apartments front and back, and every week Edna is screaming at somebody, and every week somebody has to move away. Once she threw out a pregnant lady just because she owned a duck, and it was a nice duck, too. But Ruthie lives here, and Edna can't throw her out because Ruthie is her daughter. Ruthie came one day. It seemed out of nowhere. Angel Vargas was teaching us how to whistle. Then we heard someone whistling, beautiful like the Emperor's nightingale, and when we turned around, there was Ruthie. Sometimes we go shopping and take her with us, but she never comes inside the stores, and if she does, she keeps looking around her like a wild animal in a house for the first time. She likes candy. When we go to Mr. Benny's grocery, she gives us money to buy her some. She says to make sure it's the soft kind because her teeth hurt. And then she promises to go see the dentist next week. But when next week comes, she doesn't go. Ruthie sees lovely things everywhere. I might be telling her a joke and she'll stop and say, the moon is beautiful like a balloon. Or somebody might be singing and she'll point to a few clouds. Look, Marlon Brando. Look, a sphinx winking. Or my left shoe. Once some friends of Edna's came to visit and asked Ruthie if she wanted to go with them to play bingo. The car motor was running, and Ruthie stood on the steps wondering whether to go. Should I go, Ma? She asked the gray shadow behind the second-floor screen. I don't care, says the screen. Go if you want to. Ruthie looked at the ground. What do you think, Ma? Do what you want. How should I know? Ruthie looked at the ground some more. The car with the motor running waited 15 minutes, and then they finally left. When we brought out the deck of cards that night, we let Ruthie deal. There were many things Ruthie could have been if she wanted to. Not only is she a good whistler, but she can sing and dance too. And she's had lots of job offers when she was young, but she never took any of them. She got married instead and moved away to a pretty house outside the city. And the one thing that I can't understand is why Ruthie is living on Mango Street if she doesn't have to. Why is she sleeping on a couch on her mother's living room if she has a real house all her own? But she says she's just visiting, and next weekend her husband is going to take her home. But the weekends come and go, and Ruthie's sit days. No matter, we are glad because she's our friend. I like showing Ruthie the books I take out of the library. Books are wonderful, Ruthie says, and then she runs her hand over them as if she could read them in Braille. They're wonderful, wonderful, but I can't read anymore. I get headaches. I need to go to the eye doctor next week. I used to write children's books once, did I tell you? One day I memorized all of The Walrus and the Carpenter because I wanted Ruthie to hear me. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. Ruthie looked at the sky, and her eyes got watery at times. Finally, I came to the last line, but answer there came none, and this was scarcely odd, because they'd eaten every one. And she looked a long time looking at me before she opened her mouth, and then she said, You have the most beautiful teeth I've ever seen, and went inside. Okay, so as you can tell, Ruthie is different. So let's go through some of the notes that I have here. And we'll talk about some of the character traits that maybe you noticed in here. First of all, as far as plot, Ruthie appears to be the only child of Edna. Edna owns property, is like a landlady, not necessarily wealthy, but probably a little bit more powerful than some of the other people on Mango Street. We actually first heard about Edna from Kathy. If you remember back to Kathy, Queen of Cats, on page 12, Kathy had told Esperanza that Edna is the lady who owns the building next to you. She used to own a building big as a whale, but her brother sold it. So we have had a reference to her in another vignette, but we didn't know who Edna really was. Now, Edna's not a really nice lady, and she has this adult daughter named Ruthie. Now, Ruthie's name, even the name Ruthie, sounds childlike versus maybe calling her Ruth, which is more of an adult name. But Ruthie is called a grown-up, and that's in the very first sentence where it says she's a tall, skinny lady with red lipstick and a blue babushka, and then it says is the only grown-up we know who likes to play. Obviously, that implies she's older in chronological years than Esperanza, Rachel, and Lucy, but she still plays, and that would be really unusual if she's an adult, because Alicia, who goes to college, doesn't play. She's in school. The other characters don't play either. Marin babysat. Marin sold Avon, but Ruthie plays, so that's a big distinction. Now, again, it also says she does some sort of unusual things like plays by herself and also laughs by herself. And then she wears mismatched clothes. So at this point, probably some inferences you might be making would be she's weird, she's mentally challenged or disabled, she maybe has some sort of a psychological problem. Any of those things could be true. It does not appear that she is maybe at the right intellectual level for her age. And we don't really know why. We don't know if it was some kind of trauma or if she was just born this way. We have no background. But obviously, she is not able to be a self-sufficient adult, even though she's called a grown-up. So her mother also does not seem to be very nurturing and caring. She is very rude to her, as well as other people in the neighborhood. Edna does things like screams at everybody, it's said, and threw out a pregnant lady from her apartment because she owned a duck. And even when her daughter asks her, should I go, Ma, when some friends in a car come to pick her up, she doesn't really help her daughter make a decision or say, have fun, you can do this. If she knows she's nervous socially, she just says, I don't care. So again, we get this impression that Edna is a very distant, non-caring mother, and Ruthie's a very dependent, childlike adult. So there are other many mentions of childlike things in this vignette. It seems almost like Esperanza is the adult and Ruthie is the kid, and that Esperanza has to take care of her when they play. For example, Esperanza goes and gets her candy because Ruthie won't go in the store. And so we have a role reversal here in this vignette that Ruthie's more childlike than the kids. So there are lots of references to childlike innocence, like Ruthie plays, likes candy, she's scared to go shopping by herself, she can't make decisions, like if she should get in the car and go play bingo or not. She has to ask her mother's permission, but she's an adult, and yet she's saying, should I go, Ma? Should I go? Again, all those things seem very incongruent with her chronological age. So obviously our author is trying to make a point here, that Ruthie is not really adult-like. And there's a problem if you live in the adult world, but you're not ready for the adult world. And again, we go back to that same motif of the child world versus the adult world. And in this vignette, we see what happens if you can't go into the adult world, but society expects you to. So again, we have a connection to Nenny in this vignette. Some of you might have noticed that there was also a pointing out of cloud shapes, and that was on page 68. It says, Ruthie sees lovely things everywhere. I might be telling her a joke and she'll stop and say, the moon is beautiful like a balloon. Or someone might be singing and she'll point to a few clouds. Look, Marlon Brando, or a sphinx winking, or my left shoe. Much like that vignette and some more that we did in the Reader's Theater, Nenny was pointing out clouds and naming them Benny, Blanca, Esperanza, Nenny, Geraldo. And now we have Ruthie doing the same thing. And so she's pointing out clouds in a very innocent, childlike way and naming them Marlon Brando, look, a sphinx, look, my left shoe, based on the shape of the clouds. Now, one of the questions I have in the assignment you're going to be working on is to look up the illusions of Marlon Brando, who is a person in real life, and a sphinx, which is a mythological reference. So you probably have to Google those and figure out what are they, who are they, and then maybe why would Ruthie be pointing them out. Now, again, as we continue through the vignette, we also have this contrasting idea that Ruthie is an adult because she doesn't want to shop. She doesn't, want to go out and make decisions. She can't go out with friends. She's scared like a wild animal, and all these things, her teeth hurt, all these things that make her seem young, mismatched clothes. But yet we find out in the very last page, on page 69, that she's supposed to be married. And we get this kind of confusing idea through Esperanza that maybe she really doesn't have to live on Mango Street. Now, Esperanza mentions her own innocence by saying, what I don't understand is why Ruthie would live on Mango Street if she doesn't have to. Why is she sleeping on a couch in her mother's living room and saying she's just visiting, and the next weekend her husband's going to take her home? The weekends come and go, but Ruthie stays no matter. We are glad because she's our friend. Now, that's a little bit, I think, of dramatic irony, because I think we, the readers, are supposed to understand more than Esperanza. Now, Esperanza is supposed to seem very childlike here and naive, that she really thinks that Ruthie has this great house somewhere and this wonderful marriage, and she's just visiting her mother. And Esperanza can't seem to understand, why is she still on Mango Street, because she doesn't have to stay here. She says she has a husband and a home somewhere else. Now, that obviously fits in with our knowledge that Esperanza doesn't want to be on Mango Street either. She's dying to leave, so she can't understand why someone who could leave, like Ruthie, would stay. Now, what we should be realizing at this point, if you haven't already made this connection, is Ruthie can't leave. Ruthie has failed flight. So we have this other connection to failed flight again, that Ruthie did fly by leaving Mango Street, but it was failed and she had to return. She had a failed attempt at adulthood. Maybe it was her mental state. Maybe it was a psychological breakdown. Maybe her husband left her. We don't know. Obviously, it does not really appear that she has a husband who's still in love with her, with a house that she can go back to. It appears her marriage is over for some reason. Maybe he abandoned her and she doesn't have a place to go, which is why she sleeps on a couch. Esperanza doesn't know that. She's too young to understand the reality of failed marriages or adult failed flight circumstances, but we, the reader, are supposed to see this as yet another example of failed flight. Ruthie got out, but she couldn't stay out. She got trapped and got back in, and she had to come home to Mango Street and was never able to make a definite adult decision to stay away and better her life, unfortunately. Now, again, the author's telling us one more time through these failed flight examples that it's going to be very hard for Esperanza to get out and be able to stay out and not have to come back to Mango Street. And that sometimes people who try to leave do get away for a brief period of time, but they end up having to come back because their attempts are failed. So again, the very last part is the last few paragraphs where Esperanza is talking about reading books to her. It does seem like it's very confusing. We're not really sure why. She's saying things at the end like, wonderful, wonderful. I have headaches. I need to go to the eye doctor. It does seem like she's kind of a hypochondriac, and that Ruthie always worries about, things that are wrong, and she has all these medical conditions. And then it ends with also Esperanza quoting poetry. That should connect you to Aunt Lupe in Born Bad, a previous vignette, one of our only vignettes besides Alicia, where Esperanza was told, keep writing because it will keep you free. And in this vignette, we were able to see her recite poetry to someone, and we are able to see that she's actually becoming more free than Ruthie. So she quotes this poem that she loves from memorization to Ruthie, showing again her love of language, her love of literature, and that reading and writing and education will be the way that Esperanza can get out of Mango Street. But Ruthie's reaction is very odd. I mean, she just says some random line at the end about, you have the most beautiful teeth I have ever seen, and then she goes inside. Yes, you're supposed to be extremely confused at the end of this vignette. That's the whole point. Ruthie doesn't make sense. So at the very end, when you're thinking, what is she talking about? Why is she talking about teeth? The whole point is we don't know. We're not supposed to understand why she's talking about teeth, because she's kind of unbalanced. She's kind of got mental problems. So the fact that she sounds confusing is supposed to be that way. So we're supposed to wonder, what is she talking about? And Esperanza doesn't know either. So Ruthie is quite a conflicted character. She wants to be an adult, but yet she's trapped in the child world. Now, the thing that this vignette connects back to is that idea of the child world versus the adult world, which is a major motif in this book. It's a wonderful pairing to Hips, which is the last point down here that I have. And if you remember, Hips was the jump roping vignette where they were talking about making up rhymes about growing up. Nenny was the only one who wasn't able to do it. And she was only making up rhymes that were already there. And so at that point, we were able to see that Nenny was in the child world, and Esperanza was talking about the jump roping rhythm of the double Dutch jump rope. And she said that really important line, not too fast, not too slow, not too fast, not too slow, about jump roping speed. But it was really a metaphor, if you remember our discussion, for how to go into the adult world. You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to go too slow. Now, as a reminder, we've seen several examples of moving into the adult world too fast, and that would have consequences. For example, in The Family of Little Feet, the girls put on those high heels and got the unwanted attention of Bum Man that scared them, and that was growing up too fast. In First Job, for example, she lied about her age, got thrown into a job, much how I felt at the Waffle House, and was kind of, again, uh, approached by an older man who kind of forced himself on her and kissed her against her will. And that was, again, a danger of the adult world and getting into the adult world too soon without the readiness and awareness that not all people are trustworthy. We also, again, saw Marin, for example, being someone who only wanted to find passion and love and romance and kind of rushing into the adult world as a way to find salvation. Now, none of these are good examples. So the not too fast is obviously a good piece of advice. But in this vignette, we also see the other side, which is you don't want to grow up too slowly. Ruthie is probably the only example in this book of not too slow, because if you grow up too slowly, you end up like Ruthie. You end up as a grown-up who likes to play, a grown-up who sleeps on your mother's couch, a grown-up who doesn't have her own house, a grown-up with no job. And we look at Ruthie and we think she's crazy. We think she's inept. We think she's lazy. We think she's got mental problems, that she's not capable of living independently on her own, which she is not. She can't even leave the front door. We also have that symbolism of that she's trapped in the doorway, which I think is important. We've had several other characters like Marin stand in the doorway. We've had great-grandmother Esperanza be trapped in the window, looking out a window to the other side for freedom, but she couldn't get there. And we have Ruthie also standing in the doorway and also not being able to get out because of her own mental incapacities and her own fears that keep her inside. There is no physical barrier that's keeping her. Her mom even said, "I don't care, go if you want to." But it's her own psychological fears that are keeping her trapped inside the house to where she cannot have a normal life. So Ruthie is a perfect example of growing up too slowly, not being able to move into the adult world in an appropriate way, and the consequences that come from that also.